The Burros of Berea is a conversational podcast. We study the Bible and we talk about it.
Not all of us are of the same faith, and one of us doesn't actually have a faith.
And that's wonderful. We all love one another, and we're going to continue to talk about these things.
The things we believe in and the things we believe about what we read in the Bible. Not all of these are necessarily true. Some of it is opinion and speculation. Thank you for
listening and speculating with us.
There you go. That was good. Yes.
You are listening to the Burros of Berea.
Well, welcome back to the Burros of Berea. I am Rick Welch, and to my left is Billy Eye Candy Kimsey.
Like a starburst, share something juicy.
Well, at least you got a new candy. That's good.
Nice.
The Reckoning. Carter.
Yeah.
Doesn't he sound like the Kool-Aid guy?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Straight out of Compton, Ralph Hicks.
Represent.
Behind the Glass, Rocket Man, Andy Bishop. Sarita the Edge, Edgerton.
Hello.
I always sit like terrified of
What
how
is that?
loud
It's
he's
the
going to
dunk-a-dunk?
get. Like legitimately, I'm always like terrified of how loud you're going to be.
Cherry, the Annihilator Lewis.
Hello.
Hey. Well, it's nice to be back, isn't it? It's been a while since I gave you guys that super spreader event.
Yeah, I
Tell
was
us, Sarita.
literally everybody sick.
What did I do to you, Sarita? Tell.
Walking pneumonia. 3 weeks of walking pneumonia.
That's awful. I'm so
that's
sorry.
Still coughing.
Still coughing.
I think it gave me COVID because we right after we were here last time, my whole family got COVID.
Yeah, it was really funny because I tested and it wasn't. It was negative.
I don't test, so.
Right. So therefore you've never had COVID.
You never, yeah.
And so, but I was negative, and I guess you can get a false negative from some of those little at-home tests, I assume, because
Yes,
I had
please take the ones the government sent you because they're really good on
I bought this one.
It is true, though.
False
when I
negatives.
had COVID, I like described to our drummer the symptoms, and he works at a nursing home, and I was like, but I took one of those PCR tests, and he was like, oh, just give it a couple days and take it again. Trust me, you have COVID. And guess what? He was right, and it was pretty much the same symptoms as this recently was, but I didn't test this last time either, so I'm with Sarita. I didn't have COVID.
Yeah. And I
didn't get sick.
Sarita sent me a text today, and she was like, did you see what Ken Gentry put on his page about Gary Namar today? And I was like, nope. And I went and looked at it. I was like, oh, okay. It's the same thing. It's the questions. But they sent out the letter in public today. They are really busting his chops about these 3 questions. And so I'm super excited about my guest that's going to be here today, Dr. John Noe. Yeah, that was Rick Carter there. Dr. John Noe, let me tell you guys a little bit about him. He is a conservative evangelical scholar and theologian who holds an earned PhD in theology. He's president of the Prophecy Reformation Institute and a 26-year member of the Evangelical Theological Society, where he has presented 17 theological papers and been published in its prestigious academic journal, the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society. He is also a motivator, peak performer, world mountain climber, and an inspiration. He has written 2 best-selling personal development and motivational books. They are Peak Performance Principles for High Achievers. This guy actually, I love the titles. Like, I had a conversation with him one day just about titling the book. He really puts a lot of thought into these, and he's great at titling his books. Revised edition 06, Berkeley 86, and People Power, published by Thomas Nelson 86 and Berkeley in 88. During the 80s and 90s, Peak Performance Principles was featured in Amway's top 10 recommended books. Additionally, the Amway Corporation purchased 25,000 copies to give to their employees and marketing associates. That's pretty impressive, you know. So, Dr. John Noe, thank you for being on our program.
Hell yes.
Yes.
What was that?
That was the title of one of his books.
Hell yes?
Hell yes, hell no.
Oh! Sorry about that. Thanks for being on the show, Dr. Noe.
I'm delighted to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we've spoke on the phone
And lady.
That's right. Ladies.
2 ladies.
There's 2.
Right?
Yes, we have a third one, but she's not here right now. So, I was introduced to you through Bill Evans, the truck driver theologian. You guys remember him?
Oh yeah.
And you remember, I don't, if you guys know Bill, when he actually gives a descriptor of what he believes, he says that he's a reformed idealist.
Reformed preterist.
Idealist. Isn't that correct? Anyway, I think you're going to find when we talk to Dr. Noe why Bill Evans calls himself that. I think that's going to appear as we talk today, because Dr. Noe has done a lot of work, especially in eschatology, and his eschatology is interesting. It's not full preterism. Am I correct? It is a synthesis of, how would you say that, Dr. Noe?
It is full preterism.
Oh, it is.
Plus.
Haha, preterism plus.
The plot thickens.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and we will definitely get into that later, okay? And so what I would like to do is every guest that we have on our testimony series, we ask this question. Can you tell us the earliest memory that you have of when you heard the name Jesus Christ?
Well, why didn't you give me some advance notice on that?
Guess what? That's the only question that I ask. I don't give advance notice.
I have no idea. I mean, you're stumping me right out of the blocks here. I have no idea what the earliest memory of that is.
You're not alone in that. A lot of people, when they get asked that question, are stumped. I'd say it's along the lines of 40% are like, I was so young that it just always existed. Is not an uncommon refrain.
Yeah. So sorry to stump you there. Usually once somebody says, "Oh, I was 10 or I was 15 the first time that I heard it," then I ask them, "Can you tell us about your salvation experience?"
Now that I can tell you about.
All right.
So you want me to go there or what?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your salvation experience.
Oh, well, I was raised in the church.
Oh, wow.
So, I did all sorts of stuff in the church. We were church people. We weren't very serious, but we were church people. In Boy Scouts, I got the God and Country Award. Does that count for salvation?
No. Oh, I'm just out of curiosity, which branch, which sect of Christianity?
Oh, well, we've been a little bit of both. We started out Presbyterian and then went into the Christian church, the Campbellite movement.
Oh, okay. Very good. So you were raised in church.
I was raised in church, yeah. We used to help usher when we were in grade school, and then we'd skip out and we'd go down to Carter's drugstore and buy a chocolate Coke and some crackers, and then get back in there before they closed so that they wouldn't know we were gone.
Chocolate Coke?
Yeah.
What is that?
Do tell.
Man, anybody there know what chocolate Cokes are?
No, we're all shaking our heads and wondering what.
Well, you had to go to the
I've had a
drugstore to
chocolate
get
Coke.
them because they put chocolate syrup in a Coke. That's a chocolate Coke.
Oh.
I was like a soda fountain.
A soda
thing.
fountain
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, soda. Yeah, sit on a soda stool or a bar stool or whatever you want to
And
call
the
it.
soda jerk would come up and bring
He
you
went to
your
a
soda.
Rexall
Yeah.
Drugs, y'all. That's
Yeah.
what that's called here, a Rexall.
That's back when they cost a nickel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. A nickel.
I was going to ask when that was.
Yeah.
My mom used to tell that very similar story, except hers was a vanilla Coke.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's good too.
I had cherry.
Yeah.
That's good too.
He approves of all of
All
We're
the
all in
Cokes.
agreement.
All the Cokes.
Well, my daddy's from Oklahoma, and they had a counter there that we used to go to. And he said, "Give him one of them cherry Cokes because he likes that Roy Rogers."
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
So you were raised in church, and then about what age were you when you had your salvation experience?
Oh, well, that wasn't my for sure experience. You want me to talk about my for sure?
Yeah, let's hear about
experience?
your for sure experience.
All right. Well, let's see. Where shall I jump in? Let's see. Got out of. No, I'll start. I'll skip that. Started a company here in Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and started doing pretty well. And then I realized I was really out of shape and needed to get in shape, so I started jogging and running mini marathons, a full marathon. And then I decided to start climbing mountains around the world, and climbed, oh my goodness, the Grand Teton out in Wyoming, Mount Elbert in Colorado, then the Matterhorn in Switzerland, and then my wife and I went to Africa and climbed Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya and all this kind of stuff. And during that time, I was being asked to speak about my mountain climbing adventures. From everything from grade schools to companies to conventions, and so my speaking career took off, and I became a member of the National Speakers Association, the professional society of speakers, motivational and otherwise. And there I learned, in going to their workshops, that I needed a brochure. So I have been attending a Bible study with a Baptist layman who is pretty well known here in the Indiana area. And I asked him out for lunch because I said I had some questions I wanted to ask him. And he said, sure. So we went to Mac's Steakhouse at 96 Meridian Street in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I was telling him about how I, needed a brochure and everything. And one of the questions I was having is, what do I put on this brochure to describe myself? I said, John Noe, a businessman, mountain climber, and so forth, and a Christian. I said, do you think I ought to put "and a Christian" on there? Because, I'm speaking to not only Christian groups, but I'm speaking to business groups and other groups that are not, Christian organizations. And lo and behold, he did not answer my question. He just asked me a question. He said, well, are you one? And I said, well, I think so. And he said, well, would you like to know for sure? And I thought, yeah, okay. And he laid out the 4 spiritual laws to me. And everybody there, are you all familiar with the 4 spiritual laws?
Yes, sir.
I am not.
No. That would be Andy, our resident atheist. Do you mind giving us those 4 spiritual laws?
Campus Crusade for Christ, 4 spiritual laws. He laid them out for me. And then at the end of it, he said, well, would you now like to become a Christian? And I said, well, yeah, probably. He said, how about right now? I said, well, okay.
The pressure sale.
He led me in the sinner's prayer, and I walked out of Mac's Steakhouse feeling like a fool. I thought, my gosh, what in the world have I done?
Yeah.
Because I thought I was a Christian, having been raised in the church, not knowing any better. And from that time on, my life took on a whole new dimension, and it's just been upward and onward ever since, in many, 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 many ways.
Wow. So, this is, you're already married. You've been traveling the world, mountain climbing, and you meet this guy, and it happens inside this little place in Indianapolis, this little restaurant.
Uh-huh.
Wow. And about how old were you at that point?
I was in my mid-30s, in that range.
Wow. So being raised in church, in the Presbyterian church and in the Campbellites, at no point anyone could tell or would speak to you about salvation.
Well, they probably did, but how much of it was I really hearing?
Sure. Yeah. So you've written so many things in theology, like I just read about you. So will you take us from that point to the present? Like I'm really curious how you became the John Noe of today.
Well, okay.
And you can talk about, the other, your motivational books and being on Larry King Live and lots of television programs and stuff throughout the course of your career. You feel free to talk about any of that.
Well, we came to Indianapolis, started a company, my wife and I, and we had 2 children at that time, real young. And we were in church. And that was before the story I just shared with you. Mm-hmm. And we were attending church, and then that happened. And I started getting more interested in Christian things. And we changed churches. We moved out of a liberal Presbyterian church. We didn't even know what liberal was back when we were involved with it. We just know that they had nice nice fellowship, and we were head of the young adults group. So we were very active and involved there, but we started finding problems with it because of their liberal stance. And again, we didn't even know what liberal conservative was all about, so let alone those terms. And we moved to a more evangelical church here in Indianapolis. And lo and behold, they started asking me to speak there on a number of topics. They asked me to lead a Sunday school class, which I started to lead, and we called it PSA. Stands for Positive Spiritual Attitude. How about that?
Hey, that's another good title.
PSA, Positive Spiritual Attitude. Started teaching a number of things there, and the class started out rather small, and then it started growing and got up to about 30 or 40. And about that time, we heard about a guy named John Wimber. Does that name ring a bell for
Say that
anybody around
again.
here?
You kind of cut out. What was his name?
John Wimber.
John Wimber. No.
No?
Nope.
No.
He was a charismatic, and I don't know if he's Pentecostal or not, but charismatic. And he was holding a conference up in Michigan. I think it was in Ann Arbor. Yes, it was Ann Arbor, Michigan, on the topic of the kingdom of God. Now, I had not heard very much, if anything at all, during all my various travels throughout Christian circles up to that time, about the kingdom of God. But he was saying that this is the central teaching of Jesus Christ. Well, it wasn't the central teaching of any of the churches I was attending, and I had heard nothing of it. So we decided that we were going to take a field trip up there, and I invited the Sunday school class to come along, and a few of them did. And we went up there to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we heard so much about the kingdom of God that we didn't even know existed in Christianity. And I came back then and started teaching that. And the class started growing like crazy and went from, a handful of us to 60, 70. People were staying around after class, laying hands on each other, praying for each other, doing all sorts of things. And you know what happened?
What's that?
The elders canceled the class.
Okay, so we've heard this kind of thing over and over and over. It's like things start to happen, people start changing, and the church folk just don't like it. What's that all about?
They canceled the class. And the reason was the reason stated was that people were not getting to the worship service on time because the Sunday school class was in between two worship services.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
He became a kingdom preacher.
So they were.
Yes.
And that was my first dramatic example that something is wrong with the way we practice Christianity in the organized church.
Sure. Yeah.
And then they asked me to lead a evangelism, equipping, and equipping seminar to teach people how to share the gospel with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never shared the gospel with anybody. And they wanted me. In fact, I don't know if I even knew what the gospel was. And they wanted me to lead a class on this, develop it and lead it. And they said, man, if you can do your seminars on peak performance principles for high achievers and people power and so forth, well, you can do this. I mean, so I agreed and went out and did research, went to some Baptist churches and who were doing some of those kind of activities with evangelism equipping and saw how they were doing and saw that they used the Campus Crusade material. So I decided to use it. And we developed these classes and they were phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. And the final stage of that class was we sent people out into the neighborhoods. And they would come back. I mean, we might have maybe 20 or 30 that would complete a 2 to 3 day seminar on this. And we'd send them out then on Saturday afternoon into the neighborhoods. We'd have it all organized and everything. And they'd go out and knock on doors and follow the methodology that we had trained them in. And they'd come back and we would have as many as, 20 or 30 people that prayed to receive Christ from there going out 2 by 2 into the neighborhoods. And we must have done, Rick, over a period of maybe 2 years, maybe 8 or 9 of these seminars. And then you know what happened?
What's that?
You got us
The
to leave the
elders,
church.
They canceled it.
They shut it
They
down.
canceled
The elders canceled it because they didn't think we ought to be doing that.
Wow.
And that was my second dramatic example that
What?
something is wrong.
Doesn't
with
seem
the
like-
way
Doesn't seem like much of an evangelical church.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of? I mean, that's the name, right? It's in the. One would think.
Well, I think for me is the way that he's been approached. So he's never led anyone. He wasn't sure what the gospel was. He's never led anyone. And so then someone asked him to do it. To me, I see that as providence. I see God moving in your life and doing things for you. And it's almost like, forgive me, I don't want to sound rude when I say this, like canned Christianity. Like if you follow this procedure, then you will get results. And it seems like you actually were getting results, and which again, I think is providence. And so, but each time you come up against this wall, and it's always a Christian wall. So is this hurting your heart when this stuff is happening?
Well, yeah, of course
Yeah.
it was.
Sure.
And, but I persevered and pressed on, but man, it was, I mean, we finally ended up having to leave,
Sure.
because we were, black sheep or whatever you want to term it.
Yeah.
but you were still sheep.
But we were still sheep. Yeah.
You were goats.
Yeah. So anyway, so I started writing more books, and from there, and I wrote the Apocalypse Conspiracy book, which came after my Peak Performance and People Power book, the Apocalypse Conspiracy.
Yes.
Back in 93, 91, it came out and put me on Larry King Live. I think you mentioned Larry King Live.
Yes.
My appearance on Larry King Live. Right in the middle of Waco. Anybody there remember the Waco incident?
yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I was right in the middle of Waco before it got burned down, because it lasted for several months.
Sure.
And I was there, pitted against a guy by the name of Harold Camping. That name
Yes,
ring any bell?
it sure does. Especially in
And
the
this
world
is
of eschatology.
Yeah, so this is 1993, and at that time, Camping had written a book called 1994.
Yes.
Guess what that's about?
Yeah. End time prophecies.
That's how it was all going to end.
That's right.
In 1994, and I was asked to come on because of my book, The Apocalypse Conspiracy. That was published by Wogemuth and Hyatt and distributed by Word,
Mhm.
and they had sent me out on a book tour and all that kind of stuff. So the Larry Kingsport people had heard about me from that, and at that time in '93, that was a heyday of Larry King. I mean, that's when he was watched by over 100 million people live every night.
Yes.
And all over the world. So
Did you
I went
start
to
selling
my,
some books?
So I went to my good Christian friends in the churches that I aforementioned, and I asked them what I should do, and what do you think they told me?
Quit.
Well, close. They told me not to go. You know why?
Why?
Because Larry King was not a Christian.
He's Jewish.
He's a secular Jew.
That's right.
And all he wants to do is to get two Christians, on worldwide television in front of 100 million people and discredit the cause of Christ in front of all of them.
Well, and it's
create a
also, it
bull
brings great
like
ratings.
that.
It's good fodder for TV, right? It's good, when you get people to
Yeah.
argue, people love to watch that. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. So they advised me not to go. What would you have done?
I would have went.
I would have gone.
I'd have gone.
Yeah, like you say, it was Larry King Live in '93. There's
that's
few larger platforms in the world at that point.
Yeah, I would have went. Absolutely.
That's correct. That is absolutely. So I went, but I was bound and determined that was not going to happen.
I would have taken Gary with me, though.
Yeah.
Well, it was quite an event. I mean, it's a big. It was his heyday, and they fly you out there. They pick you up in a limo. They take you to this nice, real old house kind of hotel in Old Town, Washington D.C. And then they pick you up again and take you to the studio, which at that time was in Washington D.C. And then they take you back. And I mean, it's real nice. And when you go on a show like that, they don't put you in the green room with the person you're going to be opposing at that time. Any idea why they would do that?
Well, you want all your ideas to be fresh. You don't want them to be hashed out in the green room. You want them to be hashed out on TV. If it bleeds, it leads.
You got to. That's a great way to put it. Sparks will fly, right?
Young lady, you are correct.
Thank you.
Now, when I was in the green room, though, there was somebody else there, and I didn't know who he was. So it was just he and I in the green room. So he isn't even hardly looking or noting that I'm even existing. And so finally I initiated conversation and I introduced myself, and he says, doesn't even kind of respond. And I say, and I tell him my name. Hi, I'm John Noe, and sort. And I say, who are you? And he says, Alec.
Alec Baldwin.
I say, Alec. Who? Said Alec Baldwin.
He didn't have a gun, did he?
Oh, geez.
I did. I had no idea who he was. So I said, are you on the show? You on Larry's show? He said, yes. And I said, what do you do? And
he said, I scream at women.
That did not ingratiate me at all.
Was Hunt for Red October out then? Had to be, because we saw it in high school. I saw it in high school.
Yes,
so yeah.
yes, it was.
And you didn't see that movie?
Well, that was a breakout for him.
Yes, and in fact, he said, well, I'm an actor. And I said, oh, anything I would have seen? I said, well, movies and, Broadway and stuff like that. And I said, anything I would have seen? And that's what he referred to was that movie, The Hunt for Red October. And I had seen that, but I couldn't remember him in it. I remembered Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm. Who doesn't?
But I didn't remember him. So I said, that was with Sean Connery, right? And he said, yeah. I said, and what role did you play? Well, that didn't.
Just keep digging.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was awful. No, that's back before he became famous, I guess, or infamous, or whatever he is now. But anyway, so he went on first. He was on for half an hour, and then I was brought on with Harold Camping. And Harold Camping, I don't know if do you anybody there remember Harold Camping?
Yeah, well,
now he's passed.
He's passed away.
On.
Yeah, I've seen some of those old clips off of YouTube. Yeah.
Well, he's an old codger, kind of ornery, and flaming dispensationalist, and just talk, and Larry just let him talk about how the world's going to end. Next year in 1994, showed his copy of his book, which has a big 1994 on it, and so forth. And I was bound and determined that I wasn't going to get into a bloodbath, arguing and that kind of stuff. And by the way, that was back before arguing and interrupting was popular.
Oh yeah,
and acceptable on TV and things like that. And so I guess if you did a subject survey, a content survey on who talked the most, I probably got maybe 25%, and he probably got 75%,
really? Something
like that. And Larry just let him talk, but I got my points in. And when I got back from going to Washington D.C. and being on Larry King Live, the biggest criticism I got is, why didn't you let him keep talking for? Why didn't you jump in there? Why didn't you, and all that stuff. But that exposure on Larry King Live on that format, as some of you mentioned there, which was huge, opened up a lot of doors for me all over the country. And it just blossomed into a lot of relationships with some pretty big people and opened up a number of doors for me.
Yeah, and I know that Rick Carter, who was here in the studio, mentioned, and you and I talked about this. You, since you were talking about a movie actor, you've written a movie script, right?
87.
I have.
Yeah,
I got a copy of that book when it first got published.
Really?
I did.
Has it been turned into a movie yet?
I think it's been picked up, right? Or it's on its way to being picked up?
Well, I have an option purchase agreement that my attorney in LA and I are negotiating currently. We don't know that we're going to accept it, but we have an option purchase agreement from a production company to do it.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Well, take it.
What's the name of the screenplay?
80-70.
80-70.
Oh.
Yeah, take it. No one's talking. There's no movies about it. There's no movies out there about it, I'd do anything just to get the film out. You see how easy I sell my soul? Did you see that? Anyway, back to you, Dr. Noe. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's that's one of my experiences.
Sure.
And then I just started writing more books, and Oh, I'll tell you how I got involved with preterism. Is that of interest to you?
That's actually something I wanted to get with you on, because we've had a lot of people here that are either post-millennial, partial preterist, mostly full preterist, and so after hearing about you, show
Some
me.
of us are none of those things.
Yeah,
Even Andy.
Even Andy.
That's
I don't
true.
believe I qualify for any of those beliefs.
Yeah.
Me
So
either.
tell me how you got into it.
Well, it was about the same time that I was on Larry King Live. That's one of the doors that was open.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my book, The Apocalypse Conspiracy, published by Wogemuth and Hyatt and distributed by Word, had come out. And they had sent me on a author tour. And one of the stops was the main AM radio station in Cincinnati, Ohio, that broadcast the Cincinnati Reds games.
Yeah.
And a noon slot, which was big time. I mean, that's prime stuff. And I was on for a half an hour talking about my book, The Apocalypse Conspiracy, and which is a precursor to I wasn't a preterist then, but I was talking a lot about fulfilled stuff, and then I was in that book. And when I got home, I got a call from this pastor from Warren, Ohio. And he said, "Are you the John Noy that was on whatever the call letters were for that radio station, which I can't remember now? Last week, at noon, he said, my wife and I were driving through Cincinnati on the way back on I-75 or whatever it is, on the way back from Florida, and we heard this guy on the main radio station in Cincinnati talking about preterism. He said, 'Are you a preterist?' And I said, 'What's that?'"
That question gets people into trouble.
Yeah, it sure does.
"What's that?" I had never even heard the word, at that time. And he said, "Well, yeah, that's what you were talking about. You're talking about preterism." He said, "Past in fulfillment. You were talking about how the book of Revelation was past in fulfillment." He said, "I couldn't believe my ears. I was hearing this on major AM radio station and so forth." And then he told me about the church in Warren, Ohio, which is associated with Max King. Anybody there
Yes.
ever hear of Max King?
Yes.
Yep.
And he says that's what we believe. We believe all this. So that hooked me up with those guys, and I started going up there to their conferences and meeting them, and did that for many, many years, and just gleaning all I could from that. And I found it fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and it just further solidified me in the direction that I was going, and that worked out pretty good. But like the churches, the experiences that I mentioned to you earlier, I started asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what happened?
They didn't like the questions.
The elders don't want you to ask any questions.
Got canceled.
Yeah.
You sure
I
you weren't
started
in a
asking
Catholic
questions.
church?
And that started rubbing some of the main people in the preterist movement the wrong way. And eventually I had to part company with them because they, they were so focused on historical things, what happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I started asking the question, well, what about today? If all that happened back then, what do we have today? And after all, we're living in today. We're not living in back then. Well, they were living in back then, essentially.
Sure.
And 99.9% of what they did in their books, in their seminars, and their meetings, and all that stuff was all focused on what happened back in AD 70 circa.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what do we have today? What do we have today? And then I started asking them, but well, what about all these comings of Jesus in the Old Testament, and then these comings of Jesus, these many comings of Jesus in the New Testament, and the many promises of many different types of comings of Jesus, that go beyond AD 70, and that really rubbed them the wrong way because they were so fixated on a first coming and a second coming. And I said, but that language is never used in Scripture. Jesus' birth is never called his first coming in Scripture, and for a good reason. It wasn't.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it doesn't actually say first or second coming in the Scripture. I mean,
no. In fact, what we see is
but it doesn't say the Trinity
Jesus,
either, right?
well, Oh, yeah, that would be their argument. Well, it doesn't say the Trinity either. Well, what am I supposed to do? Throw this other stuff out just because it doesn't say the Trinity?
And rapture doesn't say that either.
That's true.
Well, that was another issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them started saying, well, the church was raptured in AD 70. Have you heard that?
I
Yes.
have, yes.
And I was saying, now, wait a minute. Do you know Jesus in his prayer for all believers in John 17 prayed that we would not be removed from the world?
Yes.
John 17, I believe it's 50. I could look it up if you want me to. I think it's 17, 15, and 20, if I believe right. Remember right.
I think you're right.
He said, I said, should we believe? Jesus in his prayer for all believers or the rapture people? Whether the rapture people were dispensational or amillennial or postmillennial, or most of them are just dispensational, or whether the rapture people are preterists, which that's a mainstay in some parts of preterism.
Yes.
Who should we believe?
I think the rapture
I
people
believe
need
Jesus.
better PR.
I think that there's, you bring up a really good point, and I, if you try to talk about it, they go to 1 Thessalonians 4, and they start running through the New Testament gamut of rapturous language. You know what I mean? Like that's what will happen.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Of all your books that you have written, what is your favorite?
The one I'm currently working on.
Best one yet.
Pew! Dodged it.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. And
What is that?
Yeah, have you got it fully titled now?
Well, I'm working on 3 of them. I'll give you one of them.
All right.
You ready?
Yes.
All right. See who can guess what the topic is, and I'll give you a couple of quick clues, okay?
All right.
It's the ultimate downer topic.
Hell.
No, I already wrote one on that.
Hell yes,
Hell
hell
yes, hell no.
Suffering.
Yeah.
You're close. Go further.
Death.
Yes.
The ultimate
It's a-
suffering.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it's viewed.
Right.
Because it's viewed very negatively. So my book on this topic, it will be a positive motivational book on the ultimate downer topic, i.e. death and dying. So if you were going to write, I'll challenge you all there to do some title generation here. If you're going to write a positive motivational book on the ultimate downer topic, what in the world would you title it?
Oh,
The
Lord.
best way to die.
Doing death well.
Oh, that's not bad. It's a little canned, but I like it.
Yeah.
It's got to be
How
catchy.
about Gone with the Breeze?
I was about to go with Death Becomes Her, but
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a reuse.
Gone
but
with
still.
the breeze, huh?
Or They're Coming to Take You Away? Ha.
Calgon.
That's a
That's a
good
good
one.
one.
Well, what was that? I missed that.
Calgon.
Take me away.
Oh, gosh.
Remember the old
Shampoo. Yes.
bubble?
I have a
bad.
number of those.
Bath beads.
Some of those
Yes.
funny titles.
Sure.
But, yeah, I've gone. That's been probably my hardest book so far. My hardest book to title. And
Well, I mean, it sounds like a tough book to write. A positive motivational book on
it's
death.
hard. It's hard. I'm finding it harder to title than it is to write because I have so many different titles to come up with.
Sure.
Gone with
All
the
right.
Breeze is
Bicycle here?
pretty close. I think. I just Gone with the Breeze is pretty close. Just with the breeze, maybe something like that. I feel like it does sort of get at what I feel like you're
What about-
trying to say.
Dust in the wind.
Mm.
All we are is dust in the wind.
Yeah, that was my reaction as well.
All right, you ready for it? You want me to bounce my current title off of you?
Yes, let's hear it.
See what you think. You can criticize it or acclaim it or whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Love great, die great.
Love great, die great.
I like die great.
I know that Sarita says I digress quite a lot, so I die great.
How about love well, die well? Instead of great.
He likes the superlatives. You got to look at the name of his book, Peak Performance.
That's true.
Gotcha.
You got to remember the author.
Yeah, love well. Don't you think it's kind of middle of the road kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
No.
Now,
not really.
Kind of
the
mediocre.
the most popular book in the field is called Die Well, or excuse me, Dying Well.
Dying well.
It's written by a physician, and it's highly clinical. Not recommended.
No.
Sounds like a
general readership.
snooze fest.
No,
The
no.
ultimate snooze fest.
Well, in the studying process for writing this, I read 60 of the best-selling Death and Dying books, which are not that best-selling, by the way.
Wow.
And,
Right.
and that's not recommended. It was probably the most depressing thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Sleeping with the fishes.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, how about Slumber Party?
Oh, there you go.
So
I would
so
take
you
all
asked
of
me
those
what-
books at Barnes and Noble and move them to a different shelf if it was called Slumber Party, and just know that I had wrought destruction and move on with my life.
So anyway, that's so I have 3 more books I'm working on currently, and that I've been working on for maybe 20 years
Oh, wow.
or more, and collecting materials for them and so forth. And I've been hesitating on writing them because they're so difficult. Like this one, writing a positive motivational book on the ultimate downer topic, death and dying, and the other ones are difficult too. And they go beyond the simplicity of eschatological views,
Okay.
and those are pretty mixed up anyway.
So, Dr. Noe, if our audience wants to learn more about you, can you tell us about your website and also where they can find your books? And can you tell us about your website?
Sure. It's the Prophecy Reformation Institute. We're pioneering the next Reformation in Christianity, or advocating that we pioneer the next Reformation of Christianity. Our premise is that the first Reformation didn't go far enough, and that Reformation is primarily an eschatological Reformation, in that each of the 4 major eschatological views has both strengths and weaknesses. And the solution that I'm advocating is to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the 4 major views, and keep the strengths, synthesize the strengths, and discard the weaknesses. That has never been done, Rick, in church history.
No, as a matter of
And I had
fact, I was listening to Kim Burgess and Gary DeMar, and they were talking about how even they are in agreement with you, I think, in regard to the Reformation. To look back, it's, if you look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, you don't see a lot, of work. Eschatology kind of took the back burner. And I think it's never really been fully studied, or at least that's an opinion, of course, of mine. There's plenty of people that believe that it's all settled, but I think you're right. I think that that's something that the church hasn't really fully done.
No, not at all. In fact, in 2000, or when my book, The Apocalypse Conspiracy, after my book, The Apocalypse Conspiracy came out, I was invited to become a member of the Evangelical Theological Society, which is a closed society of conservative evangelical scholars. And and that was back in 93, 94 range. And I started presenting theological papers to their various regional and national meetings around the country and in Canada and other places where they held them. And I think I presented my first paper in 94. And I was going to present my last paper in 2020, but COVID came in and blocked it. But I've now presented over 19 theological papers. And during the early part of that, after I presented maybe 5 or 6 or 7, somewhere in that range, I was advised that I ought to, I didn't have any theological degrees or any theological education whatsoever. None, other than self-taught, that kind of stuff, which doesn't count for anything in theological circles.
Sure.
So because my book, The Apocalypse, and
John the
because
Baptist
it's
would have had
close-
a really hard time in those theological circles,
Yeah.
wearing a
Well,
camel
a
jacket
lot
and
of the
bugs.
ETS people are Baptist.
Yeah.
A lot of them, because they're conservative evangelicals.
Sure.
and that's what that society is. But anyway, what was I going to tell you? Oh, I was being advised by some that I needed to get some theological education. And so I did. I explored some places, and I was advised not to do it by a senior editor of Christianity Today magazine, who became my mentor for 2 years. He was dean of the School of Theology of Anderson University. And he said, "Don't do it; they'll ruin your writing style."
Mm-hmm.
And besides that, he said, if you get into a doctoral program, you are theirs. You have to do what they do. You got to jump through the hoops they put out, and if you don't, you are thrown out.
Yeah,
It's that tough.
it's kind of like
so
it's like a guitar player being taught by Eddie Van Halen. It's like you have this professional that's respected and they've done all of this work. And so if you're going to be taught by them, then they're going to expect you to sort of fall in line, to follow suit.
But to make a long story short, I finally found one I got into after the world continued to go on after Y2K.
Yeah.
I decided to think more long term about things. So I got involved in one and met with the dean and told him my concerns about my view. And I already knew what my doctoral dissertation was going to be. And that's the most difficult hurdle that most people face, because they don't have any idea what their dissertation is going to be. And most of them never finish their doctoral program because they can't find a doctoral dissertation that is a contribution to knowledge. And it has to be a contribution to knowledge. It can't be a report on something. It has to be a contribution, and you got to prove that to your doctoral committee.
It's pretty high bar. It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's high bar. Well, what I was advocating had never been done before in church history, and I had to prove that to my doctoral committee, that never has there been a synthesis treatment of the four divisive eschatological views in church history, and I would be the first one to do that if I could pull it off. My doctoral committee was comprised of 3 dispensational professors, so rough crowd.
Yeah,
so I'll just skip right forward. So after about 2 or 3 years, finally completed it, and then went in for my verbal defense, oral defense. And man, one of them just really got nasty. In fact, with me, and my chairman had to correct him during the process. It was amazing. But they signed off on it, and one of them said, "Don't ever associate my name with this work." And I became a PhD, and that allowed me to upgrade myself in the Evangelical Theological Society, and opened up some more doors to pursue this. So my thesis was that each of the 4 views, preterist, dispensational, premillennial, postmillennial, and amillennial, each of them has strengths and weaknesses that can be identified by a test of Scripture. What does Scripture say and not say? That simply, properly translated.
Mm-hmm.
And the synthesis is discarding the weaknesses and synthesizing the strengths into one coherent, consistent, and Christ honoring, kingdom authenticating view that is more true to Scripture than any one view in and of itself, including the preterist view, which really honked off my preterist companions.
Yeah. So, and I understand that. So how did the Reformed Preterist Idealist moniker for Bill Evans come about then?
Bill Evans has been influenced by what I just shared with you.
Yeah, sounds like it, right?
Now he's still a work in progress.
There's the understatement.
I love it. Yeah.
Don't tell him I said that.
Oh, he'll hear
he
it.
listens to this.
He listens.
I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast.
Yeah, he does.
We're all a work in progress. So
Yeah, we love Bill. Bill's a great guy.
We do.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Noe, before we close out this interview, Billy Kimsey usually has a question for each one of our guests, and I'm really curious to hear your answer to this.
How you doing, sir?
Huh.
So I ask all our guests on here. So you're a full plus preterist, right?
Well, that's one way of phrasing it. Is that
Okay.
your question?
Well,
Is that your question?
no. This is my question. So this is all new to me.
Well, let me respond a little bit more to that, and then you can go on. Okay.
Okay.
I'm a preterist, idealist, postmillennial synthesis.
Okay.
And the acrostic for that is PIPS.
Got it.
Okay. So here's
got
my
that?
Yep. So here's my question. So
And by the way, the preterist is I'm full preterist.
okay. So
I'm a Jude 3, earnestly content for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. That's full preterist.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens after that? That's where you get into idealist. And post-mill, that's where you get into the kingdom. And most preterists don't have very little to say about those issues.
Yeah. Well, most of the full preterists that I know are heavily concerned with the kingdom, that I've met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't met.
No?
Yeah. No.
Billy, what's your question?
Okay. So here's
or they've been reading my stuff.
Right.
all right. So here's my question. So when your body shuts down, all your organs fail, and that book that you're writing called Death, that happens. Where do you go? What happens?
Well, you're talking about me personally?
You personally. Yep. What do you
go
believe?
To heaven.
You go to heaven right now.
I get my judgment of loss or reward, i.e. 1 Corinthians 3, and my new spiritual body, 1 Corinthians 15, which has nothing to do with my old physical body that stays here on planet Earth and decays.
Very good.
So in other words, so there's one of the questions that was answered whenever that Ken Gentry asked, to Gary DeMar. That's one of the big contentions is there a physical bodily resurrection? And in
there was one
world history.
There was one.
Yes.
And Jesus's body is the only one that has been promised, that was promised not to see decay. That promise is made to no one else.
That's correct. The scripture is very clear about that. You're absolutely right. And before we go, Rick Carter, you had said something about the Isle of Patmos.
Yes, John.
Yes.
Being that the world traveler you are, I've been keeping up with you for a couple years now through a good friend of yours, Lynn Hiles.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he did one of his early victorious seminars in eschatology, and he was using your material.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So catching up through you and through your YouTube channel that you've since taken a break on, you talk about this wonderful event that you had with your wife, being that the world traveler you are. You had a nice trip to the island of Patmos.
Yes.
And something happened when you went there.
Yes.
And it was a very cool event that happened. Can you talk about?
Yeah. What happened? I got to know what happened.
Can you talk about so our listeners can hear again about this wonderful little cool trip that you had to Isle of Patmos, which most of us have never been to?
Yes. Hold on just a second here. Have you seen the YouTube video we did on this, the two of them?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I have not.
Okay.
No.
That's why I brought it up for everybody here, at least, so the Burros could hear this really cool event that happened.
All right. Well, we show that we have visuals and stuff like that to emphasize.
Now the bad part
our
is
YouTube channel is John Noe at Greater Than We Believe.
There's also a Facebook.
Greater Than We Believe, and these two videos on what I call my Patmos experience are videos number 8 and number 9. And here's a description of them. In 2006, I traveled to the island of Patmos on a personal pilgrimage with great expectations for a personal blessing and revelation. On the Lord's Day, I actually stood inside the very cave where the glorified Jesus Christ appeared to John and gave him the book of Revelation. A lot happened and didn't happen, or so I thought at that time. And that video describes what happened. And then in the next video, we go into what does it mean, my biblical analysis. I say, upon returning to the United States 6 days later, my revelation and confirmations hit me like a lightning bolt out of the sky, but you be the judge. And those two videos lay all that out of what happened. And what happened in the sky.
All
I
right.
recommend those two videos to your attention.
Awesome.
Both of them are about 30 minutes long.
Very good. Well, to my listeners, if you go to his website, would you please repeat your website once again?
It's the Prophecy Reformation Institute, prophecyrefi.org, prophecyrefi.org.
Perfect. And if you are looking for, you will see in our summary for this podcast, I will have a link to his website there. And I imagine you still have several books in print that they can get through.
If they go to the website, you can get the books, and there's a link to Amazon for all of the books.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Right there on this website.
Unraveling the End Times is a pretty good one.
Unraveling the End Times.
I do have a question because you guys said something about going to heaven without dying, and you said Jesus.
Not without dying.
Oh, okay. So
No, he died.
I just misheard what you guys were saying because I'm thinking of Elijah and Enoch, and I'm going, wait a second. There's something in my brain saying something different.
No.
No, it's appointed unto man to die once, and then the place to judgment.
That's correct.
That's applicable to all of us.
That's exactly right. Well, Dr.
Even
John
Jesus
Noe,
died.
Yeah.
he did. And he resurrected.
Yep.
Dr. John Noe, thank you so much for being on our program.
I enjoyed it, gentlemen and
Yeah,
lady.
thank you.
And ladies.
Ladies.
You didn't hear Cherry.
ladies.
You didn't hear Cherry talk much. She doesn't talk. Come on, Cherry, say something.
Thank you.
Isn't she nice? So nice. Yeah. But thank you so much for being on the program. And as we continue to go through our studies, Dr. Noe, we'll probably reach out to you again in the future and talk to you about the synthesis that you've worked on and try to learn more about that more in depth.
Well, it's the basis for the next Reformation of Christianity.
It's a strong statement. Well, thank you again, and Billy, and Rick,
Yeah, thank you.
and Ralph, and
Represent.
Andy, and Sarita,
What's
Cherry,
up?
and my dad. Nobody heard my dad. My dad's just hanging out in the studio with us today. You didn't hear him. He was about to fall asleep because
Triple
he couldn't hear the guy talk, but he was just sitting here. Oh, he could hear through him. Okay. Anyway, well, guys, we will talk to you again next time on the Burros of Berea. Peace out. Jinx,
She got me a soda.
Yoda Coke. Hey guys, this is Rick from the Burros of Berea. Do you know how much blood, sweat, and tears it takes to make a podcast? None. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't cost a lot. And so if you guys don't mind, if anybody would like to give to help us with these episodes, it would be great. We'll put out even more content. And if you go to our Patreon page, just search for the Burros of Berea, you'll get extra notes, extra episodes, and it's pretty much free. $1 gets you a lot. Thanks, guys.